Hello everyone, Prime here. I hope you're having a great day, because today we're going to be doing something slightly unusual. We're going to be going through all the gods in Smite and deciding which ones would be the best to either, and this is out of all of these options, not one specifically, but either live with, be friends with, know in real life, or just date. So we'll start off with the worst, and first on the list, which isn't in alphabetical order, Daji. She's very, very, very likely to kill you in the worst way you could possibly imagine, and all throughout her mythological story, she was essentially a worse torturer than, well, Jothri could have been, or any sick, messed up torturer you could imagine. Her ultimate in-game is based off of a torture device that she invented. Those of you that don't know, her torture device, or at least the one that she's most famous for, had her, or the people under her command, strap a poor victim to a cylinder that was housed on top of a bunch of burning coal. The cylinder would eventually get heated up thanks to the coal. Now, sometimes, or in fact most victims, were forced to dance on top of this burning coal, and eventually they'd try to attach their feet to the gradually burning cylinder. And as you can imagine, eventually it was futile, because eventually the cylinder would get so hot that they'd just burn and have horrible, disgusting injuries on their skin or other parts of them. And it was the worst form of public execution because, yeah, they showed these things off like they were special events to many crowds. Daji was a horrible person, and this was not the only example of torture that she decided to use on people. She was famous for many unthinkable methods of torture. Next up, we have Al Kwang. And Al Kwang seems like he'd be a pretty depressed god. He gets defeated by a child after said child, or young prince, killed his son, or one of his sons. The people who worshipped him got gradually greedy, and more greedy over time, and asked so much of him. And the famous Monkey King beat the Al Kwang out of all of his dragonly guards and straight up just took a very legendary weapon from his palace. Al Kwang doesn't seem like he'd be the merriest of chaps, and also he's a giant dragon who seems like the type to just lord that over you and possibly may even end up eating you. Then we have Poseidon / Zeus. Zeus is actually a bit of an interchangeable one. I was considering putting him in a different category, which I'll tell you the rest of the categories as we go along here, but Poseidon's here because they're both pretty much dicks, but Zeus seems like he'd be more useful in more situations than Poseidon, so Zeus seems interchangeable, but Poseidon, they're both big on promiscuity and just pretty much doing anything they want sexually. And usually other people, such as Medusa, end up having to pay for their horniness. So, yeah, they're not very nice chaps to know. Then we've got Hel. Based off of her Smite depiction, she seems like a pretty crazy psycho along the lines of Daji. Maybe a bit less than Daji, but then of course she's got a split personality, so one second she might want to kill you, the next she might want to bake cookies with you. Cookies are pretty cool, so she's not as bad as Daji in my book. Then we've got Aphrodite. Aphrodite would not be a very fun person to be around. I mean, her diva skin really says it all. She'd get old real fast. Bellona would probably punch you in the face every day, would always want to fight, and essentially, if she's not in some sort of war, she'd be pretty bored. All she'd want to do is just fight in a war, I'm guessing, so she doesn't sound like the best company to have around. And for a very similar reason, Xingqian and Raijin also make it in this category, because all Raijin does is spend his time all day fighting his brother to see who's the king of the sky, or the strongest out of the two. And Xingqian literally brought himself back to life, or saved himself from death, by turning his chest into his new head so that he could continue fighting. So those three, they don't sound like the best people to know. Then we have Scylla. Scylla's favorite thing to do is to break boats that just randomly want to sail across a big open part of the sea that she's in for fun. So kind of similar reasons to Daji why you wouldn't want to chill with Scylla too much. But the worst part about it is that Scylla, being a little kid, you don't want to hurt a little kid. Even if that kid sprouts like 4-headed dogs, which, okay, she also gets a little leniency because dogs that may be used to kill you, but dogs, come on. So, Scylla, again, not as bad as Dachi. Then we have Fafnir. Fafnir is in this category because you do not want to include money in the same sentence that he's involved in. He would drive you crazy over money purely because if you ever borrowed money from him, he would add interest onto the interest that would then have a baby with interest. You would owe a crazy amount of money eventually. Plus, he seems like the type to be overly like the dude guarded his gold in his dragon form and stayed in his cave with his gold until a hero came along and chopped his head off. So, he's got a money obsession that's to a ridiculous nth degree. Doesn't sound like the most fun person in the world. Plus, he's a dragon, so he could kill you pretty horribly if he was ever angry at you over gold. Medusa. Now, I really at first found it somewhat difficult to add Medusa to this section. I mean, it's kind of obvious why she would be. She could easily turn you into stone, and she seemed like she'd be completely bitter and just boring or just depressing to be around, right? Same reason as Ao Kuang and Hel. But perhaps if you got to know her a bit, maybe she'd show you a bit of a sympathetic side. She wouldn't be a bad person to keep around, provided that she wears a mask and doesn't take it off ever, and you don't look into her eyes. But going by Smite, you know it's the mask. She takes off the mask and then you're turned into stone, so yeah. And now the next god, pretty much the same reason as Medusa, Ao Kuang, so on. Depression is real with Izanami. She's practically a rotting corpse that somehow got out of Yomi to be friends with you, or be in a weird relationship with you, which that would... What is that? Is that necrophilia at that point? If you're into necrophilia, then I'm sure this is the wrong category for me to put her in your opinion, but for me personally, no thanks, no. If you wanted to freak out your friends, she could have that use, but other than that... And plus the fact that she does want to kill 1,000 people every day, you'd make that very easy for her. Probably not the best idea to be friends with Izanami. Then again, you could potentially save yourself from her wrath by being her friend, so I suppose that's a plus, bright side? Yeah. Moving on, we've got Jingwei. This is a personal pet peeve I have with Jingwei, and I suppose I get one, right? I don't like Jingwei's voice back. That's why she's here. It's bias, it's a bit BS-y. Yeah. I'm sorry, but that's why.
So sorry.
Next one is almost a similar reason of just pure annoyance, and that's Ares. And Ares was said to be a very, very whiny chap, especially when he'd get, hit or damaged in battle. He wasn't necessarily the most fun person to be around according to Zeus and Hera. That's why Zeus and Hera didn't like him too much, because he was just a whiner. Also, he doesn't look like he's a very chill dude, so there's that. Next up, we have Thanatos. Thanatos, besides from the fact that no one's really friends with death, it's pretty difficult to be friends with, that one itty-bitty thing that most, if not all of humanity spends a lot of life, most of life, all of life, in a not very fun way. So... Also, he seems like he would be somewhat depressing to be around. And there's the minor detail that he spends a lot, if not all of his times, guiding souls from the living world, the earth, to the underworld. So he wouldn't have a lot of time to hang out. Then Guan Yu seems super serious all the time. He looks like he doesn't make jokes in game. I mean, you've got characters like Rama and Kali who don't make jokes either, which Kali's here for a different reason, but I suppose now that I think about it, yeah, Kali being in the worst section also, I guess, because she doesn't seem to like to make jokes. But Guan Yu literally seems like he'd be awkward and boring to be around, so he's there for that reason. Song Kuei... Okay, no, not Song Kuei. So, as I mentioned, Kali here because she doesn't seem like she likes jokes too much, but also, unlike Guan Yu, she actually does have an idea of fun. Problem is that her idea of fun is cutting off someone's head and juggling it with someone else's head, and then someone else's head, then maybe making a necklace out of decapitated heads. See the problem there? Yeah. So, that's why she's here. And the last person on the worst gods to be friends with, date, know in real life, things of that nature, Nox. purely because she seems like this is going to be a common theme with this section, but she's the last god. Very, 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 very depressing to be around. And also, who likes the dark? I mean, growing up, did you ever hate the dark when you were a kid? I think most people, if not everyone, hates the dark. I mean, I'm not scared of it anymore, but still, no one likes the dark, right? I sure don't, so she's on the worst section. Also, I think I've been pretty fair with putting Nox here. It's not like I came up with the excuse of everyone hating the dark for the sole purpose of putting her here, purely because I really don't like her silence field in game. That completely awful ability that should be definitely removed from the entirety of the game, as it ruins everything that holds the game together besides maybe Aegis. Also, I lied. There's one more god who's going to be here, and Nox is not the last god. There's one god who you definitely wouldn't be able to control, and who would most likely ruin your world as you know it. Baka Zora. Baka Zora would be awful. In his mythology story, he terrorized a local village by eating a bunch of people there until he stopped eating a bunch of people and only ate one person, the poor person that gave him the agreed upon cart of food that Baka Zora requested to not eat people. Yeah, and it's funny because I always wondered if the hero that slayed Baka Zora didn't come along and slay Baka Zora, then eventually the village would stop producing people and Baka Zora would have wiped out the village, then probably moved to the next village, a bit like a parasite, just going around eating everything. So I ask you, Baka Zora's not like a dog. You can't just tell him, hey, stop, spit out that person, spit out Susan, spit out Jeremy. He's eating Susan and Jeremy. Then Kyle and Dewey and so on and so forth. And eventually everyone's kind of, sort of, gone. He'd probably also eat you, and that's not preferable. Sure, okay, he's got some practical uses. Like, for example, if you were a bit short on cash and needed to pay the restaurant bill, well, problem solved. At least temporarily, but problem solved. If you've got a long line and you don't want to wait for a very long line at the supermarket, problem solved. Again, temporarily, but problem solved. And I think I'm starting to get a bit of that Daji effect. You know, because Daji turned the person that she married in her mythological story into a heartless, unsympathetic, remorseless killer, in a sense. An awful ruler. Thank you for making it to the end of the video, and thank you for 1,000 subscribers. Feels weird to say, 1,000 subscribers. It's pretty special to me. I mean, I know in the grand scheme of YouTubers, there's like many, many, many thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, perhaps, of channels that have like 1,000 subscribers, but I don't know, it's pretty special to me. I don't really understand how over the weekend I've suddenly gotten 1,000 subscribers, but I'm not going to question it. It's a thing, it's a good thing, and I'm grateful for it. As for this video, I mean, it was supposed to be, the audio file was like an hour long, and I was forced to split up the video into 3 parts. There's going to be 3 parts. There's a middle section and a best got to live with the yada yada section coming up. As when I get around to editing, the visuals for that, not too sure. It's funny, when I make a video, the longest part is always editing the visuals, the audio. I mean, if I only had to upload an audio file to YouTube, I would probably end up doing daily uploads, but yeah. So tell me what you think are the worst gods you could possibly imagine living with, or just knowing in real life. And no, I'm not budging from Jingwei. If you enjoyed the video enough and feels like it deserves it, go ahead and leave a like. I'm assuming you wouldn't have gotten this far into the video if you didn't like it enough and would have wanted it to give it a dislike, so that's a thing. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Subscribe if you feel like it. And until the next one, thank you very, very much for watching. I've been Prime, and I'll see you in a few. Bye-bye.